Good morning, students. Today, let me continue with that digestion chapter. And today's topic is absorption of digested food and control of digestion. That is the regulation of digestion process. You know what is absorption is? Absorption is nothing but the process of transportation of the digested food from the site of digestion to the site of requirement. We have already discussed the details of digestion process in the previous video. So the process of digestion gets completed in the small intestine, and from where it has to be transported or shifted to the different parts of the body or all parts of the body, that is to each and every cell of the body, because every cell is always in a demand to receive the digested food nutrients as well as oxygen and other such requirements, and they make utilize of this absorbed digested nutrients, oxygen, to develop or to produce the energy in the form of ATP through a process called oxidation or oxidative metabolism. So it's very clear now that the process of absorption, it starts after the process of digestion. And you know that we consume variety of food materials like carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and so many other things. And let us discuss about the absorption of three major components or the constituents of the food that we consume. So in the beginning, let me start with absorption of carbohydrates. The absorption of carbohydrates is the intake of monosaccharides from the lumen of the intestine into the blood, and they enter the portal system of the blood, and the absorption of carbohydrates mainly occurs in the small intestine, and the rate of absorption of glucose is about 120 grams per hour. Carbohydrates are absorbed in the form of glucose, galactose and fructose, the monomers of these carbohydrates. Glucose and galactose are absorbed much more rapidly than fructose. That means the rate of absorption of glucose and galactose is more when compared to fructose. Glucose and galactose are absorbed by active transportation. Coming to monosaccharides, which are present in the lumen of the intestine, they are transported through plasma membrane of the intestinal cells into the cytoplasm. From the cytoplasm, they diffuse into portal system, and the plasma membrane of intestinal cells has some carrier protein sodium dependent glucose transporters, and these carrier proteins has two binding sites, that is one for glucose and one for sodium, and after binding it moves across the plasma membrane and released into the cytoplasm and then diffuses into the blood, and the SGLT also transport the galactose. So, however, the absorption depends upon the complete digestion of carbohydrates. So, if it is completely digested, then it can be readily absorbed or easily absorbed. Lactose is less easily digested than maltose and sucrose, and hence they find their way into large intestine, where it may serve as food for the intestinal microorganisms, and certain lactose fermenting microorganisms are said to be highly beneficial by utilizing this lactose, and they may be encouraged to grow in large intestine by eating large quantities of lactose. So this is a diagrammatic way by which we can understand the mechanism of absorption of carbohydrates. So there are three such mechanisms, as we already discussed. That is, one is passive diffusion and facilitated diffusion carrier mediated method, and active transport. And as you see here, some of the molecules, they are readily absorbed through diffusion process from the surface of the plasma membrane, and as it is not requiring any energy, it is considered as passive transport. So this is how diffusion takes place from a region of higher concentration to a region of lower concentration. And As I told you already in the previous slide, there are some carrier protein molecules which will carry these carbohydrates from the outside of the plasma membrane to the cytoplasmic region. So here you can make out those kind of carbohydrate products of digestion which will be facilitated through such carrier protein molecules. Hence, this is referred to as facilitated diffusion. And here also, no expenditure of energy is involved. So, this is also considered under passive transport. So, there are two such passive transport mechanisms. One is diffusion and another is facilitated diffusion. And there is another such mechanism by which carbohydrates are being absorbed, that is called active transport. And as you see here, this is the outside of the plasma membrane of such cells of the intestinal epithelium, and this is for the cytoplasmic region. And here these molecules are going to be absorbed by the utilization of the metabolic energy, that is ATP. Hence the mechanism is called active transport. Coming to absorption of proteins. In the lower parts of the small intestine, the amino acids are transported from the intestinal lumen through the intestinal cells to the blood, and this movement of individual amino acids require special transport proteins and the cellular energy molecule ATP. So here also there is some passive transport and there is some active transport. And once the amino acids are in the blood, they are carried by both RBCs and by the liquid part of the blood, that is plasma, and the amino acids are then distributed to all the body tissues where the various body cells take and what they need to repair and reform the protein structures that they need. And actually these proteins, when they are completely digested, they produce amino acids, and those amino acids are being utilized by the cells to produce the required protein, and the cycle repeats like this. So there will be the recycling of the end products of protein digestion into the actual structural proteins or the functional proteins that the cells require. And just as some plastics are recycled to make new products, the amino acids are recycled to make new proteins. This is what I told you in the previous paragraph. And all the cells in the body continually break own proteins and build new ones, a process termed as protein turnover that occurs inside the cells. And every day about 250 grams of protein in our body are dismantled or are going to be changed, and the same amounts of new proteins are built. So how this is possible? It is by the absorption process only. That is, the end products of protein digestion called amino acids, they are being transported through the blood, and they are going to be absorbed by the cells to develop the required protein. So the process called recycling of proteins or the protein turnover. So here is the picture which will show you how these proteins are going to be absorbed in the lumen part of the small intestine. And as you see here, these are the small peptides, that is the intermediary products of proteins, and these are large peptides which are the intermediary products of protein digestion, and these are amino acids, the final products of protein digestion. And this is the lumen part of that small intestine, and this is what the blood, okay, and this is what the plasma membrane of those cells that lines the intestinal epithelium. And as you see here, these amino acids are going to be absorbed directly through the mechanism of diffusion, and they will enter into the cytoplasm, and then they are going to enter into the blood. However, there are some large peptides which finds their way through the plasma membrane again, and they will enter the cytoplasm directly. And the intermediary products like small peptides, they will enter into the cytoplasm of the cells through a type of active transport mechanism, and peptides are released, and those peptides are finally converted into amino acids, and then they are going to be absorbed into the blood. And there is another mechanism where the peptides are directly entering into the outside the cell. That is what you can make out in this slide. So this is how proteins are going to be absorbed in our digestive system. Coming to absorption of fats. The major products of lipid digestion, that is fatty acids and two monoglycerides, enter the enterocyte, that is the cells of the intestine, by simple diffusion across the plasma membrane. A considerable fraction of the fatty acids also enter the enterocyte via a specific fatty acid transporter protein in the membrane. So some of these fatty acids and glycerol or glycerides are being transported through diffusion, and some through the carrier proteins, that is transporter proteins in the plasma membrane. Lipids are transported from the enterocyte into the blood by a mechanism which is distinctly different from what we have seen for monosaccharides and amino acids. So in monosaccharides and these amino acids, they are directly entering into the bloodstream for the further distribution to the other body cells, other tissues. But here it is quite different with reference to the lipid transportation. And once inside the enterocyte, fatty acids and monoglycerides are transported into the endoplasmic reticulum, where they are used to synthesize triglycerides. And beginning in the endoplasmic reticulum and continuing in the Golgi, triglyceride is packaged with cholesterol, lipoproteins, and other lipids into particles called chylomicrons. So before they are directly being transported, they are being produced into some complex masses of these lipid molecules called chylomicrons. Chylomicrons are extruded from the Golgi into exocytic vesicles of the plasma membrane, which are transported to the basolateral aspect of the enterocyte, that is at the basal side and on the lateral part of the basal side actually. The vesicles fuse with the plasma membrane and undergo exocytosis, that is the contents will be thrown out of the cell, the process called exocytosis, and if it enters it is called endocytosis. And after this exocytosis, the dumping of the chylomicrons into the space outside the cells. That is what I have shown you the picture, and this is how the fatty acids are going to be absorbed. And because chylomicrons are particles, virtually all steps in this pathway can be visualized using an electron microscope. So by using an electron microscope, we can see how exactly this absorption of fatty acids and glycerides or the glycerols are happening in our digestive system. And the transportation of lipids into the circulation is also different from what occurs with sugars and amino acids. Instead of being absorbed directly into the capillary blood, these chylomicrons are transported first into the lymphatic vessel that penetrates into the each vellus called the central lacteal. I have already shown you the structural aspect of a single villus in previous class, and that is through this lacteal, the central part of the each villus, these fatty acids are going to enter. And until recently, it was not understood how the large chylomicrons are taken up into the lacteals, and as it turns out, there are patches of the lacteal in which endothelial cells are held together through specialized button junctions that are much more permeable to chylomicrons than normal cellular junctions. So these button junctions play an important role in the absorption of digested fatty acids. And these button junctions are found in the endothelial cells of the small intestine. Chylomicron rich lymph then drains into the lymphatic system, which rapidly flows into the blood, and the blood-borne chylomicrons are rapidly disassembled and their constituent lipids are utilized throughout the body. So this is quite a different mechanism of transportation of lipids, that is the fatty acids and glycerides, that is through a masses called chylomicrons, a specialized mass. Another lipid of importance that is absorbed in the small intestine is cholesterol. Cholesterol homeostasis results from a balance of cholesterol synthesis and the absorption of dietary cholesterol and the elimination of cholesterol by excretion in the bile. So through these three different mechanisms, the cholesterol homeostasis is going to occur or take place. This cholesterol homeostasis is very important. Otherwise, it leads to the increase in the amounts of cholesterol in the blood, and that leads to the heart disorders. And this lipid digestion or the lipid absorption, it plays an important role in the regulation of this cholesterol homeostasis. And years ago, it was shown that cholesterol, but not plant sterols, is readily absorbed in the intestine. And more recently, a specific transport protein called NPC1L1 has been identified that ferries cholesterol from the intestinal lumen into the enterocyte. So this transport protein called NPC1L1, they act like a boats which will carry this cholesterol from intestinal lumen into the enterocyte. And from there, a bulk of the cholesterol is esterified, incorporated into the chylomicrons, and shuttled into blood by the mechanism as described above. Coming to the picture showing you the absorption of fats, and as you see here in the beginning, these are the large fat droplets which will be emulsified by bile or the bile salts, and such emulsified fat droplets are called micelles, which thing I already told you. And these micelles are entering from the lumen into the these cells, and the lumen of the intestine, it will have these emulsified fats. You see, this is the bigger sized fat droplets, so the large fat droplets, and these are the emulsions of fatty acids and glycerol called micelles, and those micelles will enter into the cell, that is enterocyte, through the plasma membrane only, that is through a mechanism called diffusion or active transport. And these fatty acids and monoglycerides resulting from fat digestion leave the micelles and enter epithelial cells, and the fatty acids are going to link to the contents of the cytoplasm to form triglycerides, and the fatty globules combine with proteins to form chylomicrons, that is, it happens inside the Golgi apparatus. So you see here, these are the chylomicrons, the masses of the fatty droplets, that is micelles, which will be in association with proteins. And such chylomicrons, now they leave the cell and they enter into the lymphatic vessel, what is called as lacteal, which is present in the central part of the villus region. So this is a picture which will clearly show you how that absorption of fats is facilitated. Coming to the hormonal control of digestion. The process of digestion, it is partly under neural control and partly under hormonal control. That means some hormones play an important role, as well as the nervous structures are also going to play an important role. So digestion is also controlled by the secretion of some organic substances called hormones by some endocrine glands, and each hormone has a specific target organ, and the hormones reach their target organ through bloodstream, and the hormones controlling digestion process are secreted by the walls of the stomach and duodenum. Let us go through such hormones one by one. The first one being gastrin. It is secreted by gastric mucosa, and its target organs are gastric glands, And the presence of food in the stomach and stretching of the stomach wall stimulates the secretion of gastrin, which in turn stimulates the gastric glands to secrete the gastric juice containing HCl, and thus the enzymes of gastric juice and HCl are made available for digestion process. So this is the regulation by this hormone called gastrin. Coming to the next hormone called ghrelin, it is secreted by the gastric wall and its function is to inform the brain that the body has to be fed. That means when we are feeling hunger, that time this ghrelin is produced that will send the message to the brain, and then it is producing some other hormones to stimulate the stomach or the alimentary canal to consume the food. And whenever there is no food in the stomach, this hormone is being produced. It also increases the appetite. So the appetite of a person will increase by the secretion of this hormone called ghrelin. Coming to the next hormone, secretin. It is secreted by the duodenal mucosa in response to the presence of acidified chyme in the duodenum, and its function is to inhibit the production of gastric juice. So here it stops the production of gastric juice, whereas gastrin induces the production of gastric juice. And by means of inhibition of gastric juice, it stimulates the production and release of hydrogen carbonate ions in the pancreatic juice and bile juice. So thereby the target organs for secretin are stomach, pancreas and liver respectively. Coming to the next hormone, cholecystokinin, popularly abbreviated as CCK. It is secreted by the duodenal mucosa and its target organs are stomach, pancreas and gallbladder. And its secretion inhibits the emptying of stomach, synthesis of digestive enzymes by the pancreas, and the contraction of gallbladder and emptying its contents into the bile duct. So the main role of this CCK is to empty the gallbladder so that the bile juice is made available for digestion. Coming to the next hormones like enterocrinin and diocrinin. These are also secreted by the intestinal mucosa and their target organs are intestinal glands, and when they are stimulated, there will be the release of intestinal juice also known as succus entericus, which is then made available for digestion process. The next hormone will be peptide YY, popularly abbreviated as PYY, and it is also secreted from the intestinal mucosa but of the last part, that is ileum, and a part of it is secreted by the cecum of large intestine also. Its target organs are all parts of the alimentary canal, and it slows down the passage of food along the gut, which increases the efficiency of digestion and nutrient absorption after the meal. So it is very clear that the main function of this PYY, that is peptide YY, is to allow the slow passage of food in different parts of the alimentary canal so that the food is retained for longer time and there will be the efficient utilization of its contents of the food mass. Next hormone is glucagon-like peptide 1, that is GLP-1. It is secreted in the small intestine again and colon also to some extent, and its target organs are pancreas and stomach. It has multiple effects like inhibition of the emptying of stomach, increases the appetite, and stimulates the pancreas to release insulin. So these are some hormones which play an important role in the digestion process. Coming to neural control of digestion, different phases of digestion takes place including the cephalic phase, gastric phase and intestinal phase. So these are the three different phases of the process of digestion. The cephalic phase occurs at the sight, thought and smell of food, which stimulates the cerebral cortex. Taste and smell stimuli are sent to the hypothalamus and the medulla oblongata, and after this it is routed through vagus nerve, that is the 10th cranial nerve, and release of acetylcholine, and the gastric secretion at this phase rises to 40% of the maximum rate, and acidity in the stomach is not buffered by food at this point and thus acts to inhibit the parietal cells which secretes the HCl acid and G cells which secretes the gastrin. The activity of this gastrin and the parietal cells, that is of the HCl, it is via D cell, the secretion of somatostatin. So this will be the cephalic phase. And in the gastric phase, which takes 3 to 4 hours, it is stimulated by the distension of the stomach, presence of food in the stomach, and decrease in the pH. The distension activates long and myenteric reflexes, and this activates the release of acetylcholine, which stimulates the release of more gastric juices. And as protein enters the stomach, it binds to the hydrogen ions, which raises the pH of the stomach, and inhibition of gastrin and gastric acid secretion is lifted. And this triggers the G cells to release gastrin, which in turn stimulates the parietal cells to secrete gastric acid, that is HCl, and this HCl is about 0.5% or the 0.5 to 2 pH it has, that is highly acidic, and which will lower the pH to the desired level of 1 to 2. And the acid release is also triggered, and thereby acetylcholine and histamine are going to be released. So this is the next phase called the second phase, gastric phase. And the intestinal phase, the third phase, has two parts, the excitatory and the inhibitory. Partially digested food fills the duodenum, which will trigger the intestinal gastrin to be released. Enterogastric reflex inhibits vagal nuclei, activating sympathetic fibers, causing the pyloric sphincter to tighten its content, so that there will be the prevention of food from entering into the duodenum, and inhibits the local reflexes too. So this is what happens in the third phase called intestinal phase. Coming to the other aspects of this neural control, the walls of the alimentary canal contain a variety of sensors that help regulate the digestive functions, and these sensors include mechanoreceptors, chemoreceptors, osmoreceptors, which are capable of detecting mechanical, chemical, and osmotic stimuli respectively. For example, these receptors can sense when there is the presence of food which has caused the stomach to expand, and whether the food particles have been sufficiently broken down, how much liquid is present, and the type of nutrients in the food, whether they are lipids, carbohydrates, or proteins. And stimulation of these receptors provokes an appropriate reflex that furthers the process of digestion. And this may entail sending a message that activates the glands that secrete digestive juices into the lumen, or it may mean the stimulation of muscles within the alimentary canal, thereby activating peristalsis and segmentation that move the food along the intestinal tract. So this is another aspect of this neural control, that means through some sensory receptors. Coming to the last one, the walls of the entire alimentary canal are embedded with nerve plexus that interact with the central nervous system and other nerve plexus, either within the same digestive organ or in different. And these interactions prompt the several types of reflexes. And the extrinsic nerve plexus orchestrate long reflexes which involve the central and autonomic nervous systems and work in response to stimuli from outside the digestive system. However, short reflexes, on the other hand, are being orchestrated by intrinsic nerve plexus within the alimentary canal wall, and these two plexus and their connections were introduced earlier as the enteric nervous system. And the short reflexes regulate activities in one area of the digestive tract and may coordinate local peristaltic movements and stimulate digestive secretions too. For example, the sight, smell, and taste of food initiate long reflexes that begin with a sensory neuron delivering a signal to the medulla oblongata. And the response to the signal is to stimulate the cells in the stomach to begin secreting digestive juices in preparation for the incoming food. And in contrast, the food that distends the stomach initiate short reflexes that cause the cells in the stomach wall to increase their secretion of digestive juices. So this is how there will be the regulation or control of the process of digestion. So with this I have completed that one more topic in digestion chapter. Thank you.